Welcome to everyone to the United Screens number 6, which is concerned with Tunisia. Actually, the United Screens is a kind of series of virtual screens under the title of Our Partners in Different Places and Contexts Around the World, in partnership with Scieye, the official sponsor of this project, and the representative from Tunisia, avec Association. Today's topic of discussion will be about cinema clubs in Tunisia, whether the Federation of the Tunisian Cinema Amateurs, or FTCC, the Federation of Tunisian Cineclubs, and the cinema collectives existing in Tunisia, which have recently emerged in the aftermath of the revolution, and the role they have played in the promotion of the field of cinema production in Tunisia then, and the huge obstacles they have faced, namely the issue of film distribution, as there are practically only two distributors who monopolize the whole market. Otherwise, there are independent distributors who find great difficulties in distributing their films. We're going to try to shed light on this issue. For this purpose, we are pleased today to welcome our guests, Ulfa Arfawi, who was once the executive of the regional program in integrating women managers in the Middle East and North Africa, and took part in setting up different international women networks and organizations such as I Am Here, and as a strong advocate of gender equality, she produced her own film, a short film, Equality. Our second guest is Hatem Feza, a university teacher at the High Institute of Fine Arts in Abo. He teaches audiovisual and is an independent producer. He's got his own audiovisual production company. He made his first film, half a film, then a second, Aisha's Address, and a third is under production. We also have the pleasure to welcome Sahar Ashi, a visual artist, holder of MA from the High Institute of Fine Arts in Tunis, and is now pursuing her PhD research in the High Audio Visual School in Gamart. Aisha has participated in many international programs in Denmark, Lebanon, and directed the film Mutation in 2016 and another film in between. Another guest today is Ahmed Jalasi, a university teacher who teaches photography and who directed his first film, Princess in Wonderland, which won many national and international awards and took part in many festivals. Then he made a second film, Here or Somewhere Else, and now he is in the middle of a third film, Couscous Land. And now we are going to try to share each one of these experiences, whether in relation with the collectives or with each individual experience of our guests through cineclubs such as FTCA or FTCC. To start with, let's listen to Ahmed, an independent director whose productions have been lucky to have participated in various training sessions, whether with FTCA or FTCC. I don't know if this participation has helped him in releasing his first and second film. Mohammed, I'm not listening very well. Are you hearing me? Ahmed? Okay, Ahmed, the floor is yours. What I've got from this is that the role of cineclubs, whether FTCA or FTCC, in forming a whole generation of directors, cinema lovers, or just people who work in this field. I personally am one of those. When I came to Tunis to study at the fine arts, there were no cinema schools. There was the private Maghreban school and the AD with little activity. The only school where you could practice a cinematographic activity was either the Tunisian Federation of Cinema Schools, Cinema Clubs, and the Tunisian Federation of Amateur Cineasts. I was in Tahar Haddad School of the Tunisian Federation. Then years later, I became member of the Federation Bureau, every time a different responsibility till 2006. But once inside the Federation, you can never leave. In brief, I personally discovered the ABCs of cinema in the Tunisian clubs of amateur filmmakers. In other words, those were the real schools along with the streets of Tunis. I mean the venues where the movie theaters are, as well as the culture clubs, the cultural clubs were working. This is the school where I took my first initiation. Later, the research work I did was not a real training. The real training I took was at the Federation of Tunisian Amateur Filmmakers, along with the work done in the workshops accompanying the Carthage Film Festival or other festivals. I don't know whether this is the answer to your question. That's okay. We're going to listen to each one of you, each one's experience. Let's listen to Ulfa now. Thank you for the invitation, Mohammed. Well, I'm going to talk about a different cinema, a non-conventional cinema. We may also call it engaged cinema. To introduce the work of Fabric Studio I've started working on, which is a kind of platform concerned with the emerging artists, new artistic revelations, namely in the field of filmmaking. I have had a small experience in the cinema when we produced films that have as a main message defending women's and girls' rights. And as you mentioned earlier, there was a whole international network that was established on the basis of producing films dealing with the issue of women's work in the Middle East and North Africa. We've produced 10 films from different countries such as Jordan, Egypt, Tunisia, and Morocco. I'd like to talk a little bit about Tunisian films. We worked with producers and scriptwriters when we made the calls for projects of short films, either narrative or documentary. And it was a chance to work with the late Shiraz Bouzidi, God bless her soul, Mohammed Ben Atiyah, and Kamal Aqid. Films that were produced in this framework, which we showed first in movie theaters, culture clubs, youth hostels, sponsored by associations, interested in cultural and artistic issues. Then, in some known festivals, namely whether in Tunisia or abroad, for example, the Clermont-Ferrand Festival or the Jordanian Festival Karama. But these shows were rather built on a media coverage varying from high schools to university colleges. The idea was to send the message of gender equality with the help of associations and the professionals, as we have invited directors, sociologists, as well as artists. This is it. Later I will give further details about my experience, if you like. Okay. Thank you, Ulfa. Hatem? Well, I'm going to talk about my personal experience in relation with the two federations. Although I have been fond of film watching since my early childhood, I have never had an experience with any Cineclub. My real training in this field started in the Fine Arts School. Unlike Ahmed, the period in which I came to Tunis, that is between 2000 and 2001, was the beginning of the audiovisual specialities. Unfortunately, there were no real trainers. I mean, real professionals. This is what happened to all my generation. I mean, real experts. There were no real experts. And that was the problem faced by the first generation at university. Brief, there were amateurs who were in relation with the field, who had to rely on a self-training. Later, my first experience with both federations started with FTCA in FIFAC, Amateur Film Festival in Libya. I have been there for 7-8 consecutive years since my first year in the fine arts. I attended workshops as a trainee. Then I started training in some workshops. As a student, then as a teacher, I had some reservations concerning the training there. But I can't deny the merits of such events because they are numerous. The merits outnumber the shortcomings. The most important thing was the way those youths expressed their enthusiasm for the cinema that they couldn't have shown anywhere else. It's true that some of the youths present in the event had hardly any relation with the cinema. They went there simply because they were amateurs of the cinema. However, quite a few professionals, namely well-known directors and writers, had their debut in the FTCC and FTCA as amateurs. To name but some, we have Ali bin Abdullah and Nouri Bouzid. Some people became technicians working for the radio, TV networks, cinema. Some people went to university. Some remained amateurs. I personally know some doctors and some lawyers who are crazy about films, and for 30 and 40 years now, they produce their own movies. These two federations, though they were totally different, had the same objectives at first, then each had its separate way. As for the FTCC, I have lately been invited as a trainer. They are really good people, but my biggest reproach to these two entities is that they haven't achieved much progress for at least a score. The world of the cinema has developed, but they haven't. Same equipment, same training, same topics treated in films, same themes tackled during debates, and most of the people there look the same. Obviously, the history of these two generations is a source of pride because it makes people love films. Some people moved straight away from the amateurism to the professionalism. Obviously, progress goes hand in hand with money. Yet, there could have been more precise objectives that could have led to much progress. Hatem, has this got anything to do with the fact that you are one of the founders of Collective, by the means of which you've produced 2 films, and thanks to which you could start a production company? What do you mean by relation? You mean because I have talked about both generations, which owed the merit of making many generations fall in love with the silver screen? The only entities which provided training in the field, as Ahmed has already mentioned, in a time when we could hardly find any training centers nor any schools which taught moving picture. I can't see the relation with the foundation of our collective. Okay, Hatem, I mean, there were the two federations, the FTCA and the FTCC, then came the collectives, which at a certain time played the same role of the former entities. As for the collectives, there has been several collectives, either on the formal or informal levels. If we looked at the history of the Tunisian cinema, there were some who emerged by chance. We can call them collectives while they don't consider themselves collectives. And there are those who studied together at ICA and gathered in associations soon after graduating and started their own production companies and produced pictures every 6 or 12 months till they reached an outstanding level, which granted them tribute in many renowned festivals.
وتحسنوا حتى يوصلوا للنيفو اللي نعرفوا عليه. نعرفوا توا نحن اللي هما معناها ولاو بريمي avec chaque film ils sont primés dans de grands festivals. بالنسبه للكولكتيف نتاعنا نحن.
As for our collective, it's something different, simply because it is basically a move initiated by 3 or 4 teachers together with some professional friends who decided to work with their students with pedagogical objectives, in essence. Then, little by little, we introduced our students to some professional initiation with professional attitudes. And this brought about some fruit with the very first film, which was selected among the first 20 and even 10 internationals.
C'est des objectifs pédagogiques. أنا ندخلوا بشوية بشوية نعمل des initiations للي étudiants تاعنا ندخلوهم في des projets نجم نقول عليهم professionnels avec une attitude professionnelle وبدأت تعطي من أول فيلم بدأت تعطي في حاجة مزيانة كوا avec le premier projet il وصل presque 20 sélections et 10 sélections internationaux.
Same thing with the second and third projects. The thing is that once you are into teaching, you unconsciously push your student to give more. You can't say no. You can't say no when you notice his or her eagerness to move forward with you. That is the reward. And as time goes by, that student becomes professional and it's his or her turn to shoulder you and stand by the new student. So it's a cycle that I started years ago. I send my students for traineeships. They themselves help the new students enroll in traineeships. that was the whole cycle. Then came the idea of collectives as the cherry on the cake, and which revolved around the same spirit. Thank you, Hatem. Now, Sahar, the daughter of the Federation, FTCA, in the heart of the FTCA, in fact. Okay, let me clarify something. Before FTCA, I used to be active in the FTCC in 2000 for the first film. First time was in 2000. There used to be the Kahna Club, Culture House Ibn Khaldun, with films shown all along the year, followed by debates during which we learned many things. We learned how to analyze the picture. Of course, a unique analysis directed mainly towards the kids and the young. You know, the great name started with the Tunisian Federation of Cineclubs, you know, and in parallel, there was a yearly participation in the Festival of Amateur Cinema, FIFAC, where we took part in workshops, whether photography, digital film analysis, and puppet workshops. Each time you learn something from the filmic analysis to the filmmaking itself. Of course, all this was uniquely directed to the youth and the children. Then I went to the FTCA, but frankly speaking, I don't relate my membership solely to this or that federation, simply because I don't see any difference between both entities. From a very personal point of view, I believe that they are complementary. On the one hand, you analyze the picture and the cinematographic picture, and on the other hand, you have the making of the film. Another important point that we must not forget is cinematographic training. With a simple flashback, when the FTCC was established, as Ahmed has already mentioned, there was no cinema schools. So the FTCC was a kind of informal school, which, together with FTCA, were a kind of substitute to a cinema school. There were trainings such as the week-long yearly Hamamet training, Hamamet Festival, which hosts the amateur film makers and the Cineclub members who contribute to the workshops taking place all along the week. Let's say that the experience was very organic and very spontaneous. We can say that that my relationship with the cinema was in this framework between the Amateur Cinema Festival, the FTCC, and then little by little my relationship as soon as I got my baccalaureate was rather spontaneous, as I have always had that non-formal attitude to the silver screen. And maybe this was one of the reasons why I didn't study cinematography. I didn't really make cinema courses. I joined the Fine Arts College of Tunis, ISBAT, and I studied graphic design. Later, my first contact was when I made my first movie, still in the frame of my graduation project, The film reflected my know-how in technicity, as it was an animation, a stop motion, which was realized without budget and with a very restricted number of technicians.
Donc, c'était un film aussi, c'est un film qui a été réalisé sans budget. C'est même pas un film avec un petit budget, c'est un film sans budget. والl'équipe كانت صغيرة جدا dans le sens
with people whom I know, with 3 people, and a few actors. And an assistant. The film couldn't have been realized without the experience I had accumulated during my attendance at the FTCA.
C'était grâce à l'expérience que j'avais à la FTCA essentiellement. معناتها on avait معناتها خدمنا المشروع هذاك خدمناه بنفس الطريقة اللي كونتها وتعلمتها في الجامعة.
And even the distribution of the film was purely individual.
C'était d'une manière aussi individuelle dans le sens où
with the first participation at the FIFAC in the school cinema section. From that time on, something has been born. Something that looked like a collective. After the first film was made, a second film about someone who had been there in my previous film. We directed Rami Jarboui's film Idos with the same procedure, alone. No producers, no distributors. We managed with the little equipment we had and took part in festivals, and it was projected in the GCC in 2018. Then in the Experimental Art Festival in Berlin. And finally in Tunisian movie theaters. So the same thing happened with the second film. It was a collective, even if we didn't mean to call it so. It was so spontaneously informal, an informal gathering of a group of people who worked together simply because they believed in their project and they knew each other and had the same perception of filmmaking. Then came my other film, In Between. I consider this experience very special and important, which doesn't look like the first film I'd made. There was again a very small team, namely Najla Saidi and Marwan Abouda, everybody knows. And the film was the result of a lot of discussions and long debates. Again, no budget, and the distribution was autonomous. The film was then screened in FIFAC. And other festivals, and then in Gebsfen and on other platforms. And it was granted the third prize in 2018. Then it was projected in different and various festivals. Well, Sahar, since you've mentioned the issue of film distribution, if we may link this either to the cineclubs, the collectives, or the independent films, as it was the case with Ahmed and Hatem, the question of distribution remains solely in the hands of the filmmakers themselves. I mean, I reckon that neither the FTCA nor the FTCC nor even the collectives themselves thought at any moment of the problems they may face once their film is made. According to what you are saying, even the distribution of your films remained your proper concern. And I think that at a certain time, during festivals, this caused you the biggest problem.
ونتصور اللي هي في مرحله معينه ولا في فيستيفال معين هي مشكله.
Muhammad, would you explain again how a film can't be distributed during a festival? Here we are not talking about the release of films into the theaters in the classical logic of film distribution. We are talking here about the projection of the film on the silver screen so that people can watch it. You see what I mean? Would you please summarize the question? Okay. You butt in directly here. I think I've been through this point in my intervention. Okay, I will summarize. I talked about the timeline of a film from the very beginning till the release on the screen. But I'm going to sum up. Well, my question was, either we are going to talk about the classical procedure of distributing the film, or simply the issue of taking part in festivals.
تدخل في الديستريبيوشن الحكايه هذه دونك الافتساء والافتساء اللي كوليكتيف يقعدوا ديما في مشكله انهم بعد ما يخدموا الفيلم نتاعهم يلقاو مشكله في الديستريبيوشن نتاع الافلام ولي جون اللي هي براتيكمون معناها مشكله لي جون رياليزاتور الكل.
I said that either with FTCA or FTCC or even the collectives don't realize the problems they are going to face during filmmaking until the film is ready for the release. The film producers do find a big difficulty in participating in festivals, and this is the trouble all young producers face. Did you face the same trouble? I would like to talk about the common concept of distribution, as we have always defined it in relation with the festivals, as well as the movie theaters. In fact, there is a new relationship between the civil society and the programs which have as a goal to shed light on life issues, whether climate change, gender equality, racism, or social conditions. Hence, there is a kind of relationship that has emerged between these developmental organizations and the civil society on the one hand, and the cinema, whose role is to send a message and raise awareness. And here come some unconventional partners in festivals or theaters and cineclubs. Then there are other forms of distribution.
ويصير en fait تصير ديسفوزيون تاع الفيلم هذوما اللي هما يكونوا عندهم رساله خاصه سواء من الانفيرونمون كما قلت ولا حتى ولا دكتور معناها سوجي معناها دي سوجي عندهم علاقه باللي نعيشوا فيه في المجتمع نتاعنا ومجتمعاتنا بالتركيز ولا ايور فما d'autres modèles de diffusion.
Other forms of distribution, such as social media or digital platforms, like like here with Russia's United Screens.
والا زاده يكون في دي كما تقول انت في des réunions de discussion, de conférences, des ateliers,
or during those debates, conferences, workshops, thinking tanks, which tend to convey the film's message.
مبنية على شنو عطى le film comme message. Donc
hereby we moved from the traditional perception of the cinema, which has always had a vision about the society and has as a goal to change people's perception concerning certain issue. To be more precise, let's take the example of some short films about gender equality, which I produced in partnership with Empower Women Media, a non-profit organization based in LA that sponsors short films worldwide and supports not only professional directors but also amateurs
des amateurs.
Allô?
Allô?
Alpha?
هما بعبيد عندهم خبرة في الأفلام في مساعدتهم في إخراج أفلام
helping them
القصيرة
produce their films and the distribution of the films occurs every 2 years during an online festival where they show those films and the debates following them.
بنشر الافلام هذوما ويقوموا بالديبا نتاعهم وكيف اون بارل للي ديفيزيون على لي بلاتفورم نوميريك كثير زاد ديفيزيون في اسمه في اليو هيد كوارتر في نيويورك عليه اللي يحبوا بالافلام الهما أصحاب القرار على اللي هما تنقل المخرجين الأفلام اللي هما هواة أكثر منهم الكونفيرنس. فإحنا هوني نحكيو على زادة نعرف كيفاش نجمو براند لازم نسميوها اسكو نخرجوا هوني من السينما ولا ليه هذا يظهر ندخل ديبا من الأهم
The aim behind all this is to put pressure on decision makers concerning the issues mentioned before. The most important thing here is encouraging those amateurs to make a new type of cinema different from the conventional perception and which contributes to the emancipation of our societies. I hope I have been clear. I see that Olfa sets off from a new model of filmmaking.
تفضل صحيح.
لنا هي ألفة تنطلق من un nouveau modèle de fabrication de films.
I don't know if we may call it a film, because in relation with cinema training, workshops, that has long existed. What you are doing, Olfa, is rather related to civil society, which becomes the real filmmaker. This raises the question, does this model of filmmaking or the participation in the festivals you've mentioned contribute to the training of the new generations of youths who would like to make films? Those youths, have we heard about them later on? Have they made some other films later on? Did they take part in other festivals? Did they discuss their films? With reference to the RTCA and RTCC, the most important thing was the debate about the perception of the film by the critics as well as the journalists. And this allows you to broaden your perception, your own perception, and discuss it with another audience. These are two different models. Here we are talking about a model created before 2011, represented by the Cineclubs and the Federation of Amateur Film-makers, and the post-2011 era, which witnessed a sort of explosion of different models of filmmaking, which are not the same cultural and filmic education, nor the same distribution procedure. You've mentioned that your journey in the space of civil society, the participation in the festival is done directly, where it is a question of partnership, for example, between two associations in Tunisia, America, or France. You don't need to call for tenders for a film. Therefore, the film is fabricated in the frame of a twinning or a partnership or a collaboration between two entities. To sum up, these are two different models. The traditional model, which requires going through the classical pathway of cineclubs, and the new trend that was created after 2011, which is the fabrication of films within an association outside the world of the silver screen, and which has other goals. For example, promoting gender equality, or is interested in minorities or in the environment. So they call some youths to make a film that treats these issues. Then the film is automatically selected during a festival or during a feminist or an ecological manifestation. To sum up, it's true that cineclubs are still there after 2011, but there are new models of making and distributing the film. The model is not new, Sahar. Maybe it's new in Tunisia. Let's take the example of the experience of أنا هنا. I am here, which is not a cinematographic institution, yet they worked with professional filmmakers, not amateurs. But we have also had a partnership with the FTCA for the projection of some films. There are these two pathways, the professional and the amateur. In fact, the two models converge rather than diverge. If we examine the big festivals or the film industry, such as Hollywood or Cannes, they have divisions specializing in what you may call alternative films. It is not the classical cinema that we are used to that has huge budgets. There is another form of filmmaking.
Une autre forme d'expression cinématographique qui la fabrication du film.
That's the reason why I am defending this kind of space. It's for the sake of film distribution. Actually, the ultimate goal of a film is to reach the public and to transmit its message. But later, the approaches may differ, and the messages differ from the social, economic, political, or ecological, and and this is very important and has to be appreciated, as Hatem has stated, because such platforms support the new talents who didn't forcibly graduate from a classical cinema school. You yourself, Sahar, haven't graduated from a classical school. I presume that this is a form that enables the new talents to emerge. And even if it was from a cinema school, not all of those youths would be directors or producers. The most important thing in all this is the way towards the cinematographic creation based on the image and then on the screening. Unfortunately, there are many productions that have never seen the light of the day because we have tendency to follow the same conventional pathways, thinking that that's the way things should be, while we could, thanks to some new ideas in relation with the digital, the partnerships that support you, because alone you can't do everything.
خاطر احنا ما نجموش نعملوا كل شيء وحدنا معناها الحاجه اللي انت ما عندكش نجم دي ميم دي كوليكتيف c'est de valoriser la diversité
May I, Ahmed, the floor is yours. Okay, well, we are not going to defend one model rather than the other. Well, the two models have coexisted long ago. Each model has a different pathway. Here I'm talking about my personal experience. Well, my film was an auto production realized in very special circumstances in Tunisia. Then, during the diffusion, it has toured many festivals, many festivals, where it was much welcomed. Honestly, I don't know whether because it was a good film or just because Tunisians liked it at the time. Anyway, apart from the ordinary cultural media, such as festivals and cultural and university networks, the film didn't get the chance to be distributed by the usual classical commercial media, whether in Tunisia or abroad. Also, it was broadcast in video version. This is it. My film is not the only case. It is the case of most Tunisian films, with the exception of some commercial productions. Even the films that are highly budgeted or co-produced by the state. And this is quite normal. Very normal. I have got a friend from Cairo Film School who studied cinema, had a film with an audience of 5 viewers. Meanwhile, a Limbi commercial film is a box office in Egypt, while her film was shown in Cannes. It depends. Whether it is in the entertainment or an essay film or a personal product. Therefore, distribution depends on the product, whether it is entertainment or an author's film or a personal film. Okay, Ahmed, the relevant question here that we all have to ask is, are these new forms of distribution advantages in the making of a real film? Real cinema, I mean. No. Actually, no, they are not advantages for cinema making. They are advantages just for the YouTubers. As for the cinema itself, no. What is the advantage? Watching a film at home and pay 1 or 2 euros to watch a film. That way we are more beneficiaries than the Europeans or the Americans, because in those countries, there, at least, no one is ready to surrender his copyrights. There are films which you can watch even before their screening on EGBest or any other hacking platform. In fact, although there is a diversification in the spaces of diffusion, opportunity is not available. For example, you've made a film and you want to broadcast it on Artify. Are Tunisian viewers, apart from entertainment movies or serials, going to watch it? Therefore, it's the same thing. I mean, statistically, it is the same appeal, whether to go to the cinema or to watch it on a platform. And this is quite normal. That is to say, it's not an alarming situation. It is not it is a realistic fact. We are a small country where talents are outpouring. Unluckily or luckily, we just need some geographical extension, expanding, to be open to our brothers in the East, the West, the North of the Mediterranean, America, India and South Africa, spread all over the world. If they let us migrate, we Tunisians would settle all over the world and Tunisia would be an empty desert. Quite normal. Let's carry on, talking about the context which Olfa has already started. Sorry, Sahara, but what Ahmed has mentioned is of equal importance. What I got from Ahmed's intervention is that we are still defending theaters with all its characteristics. A big screen, dubbing, a real world. A real version of films. But Ahmed, I think that your film has made a great parade as far as festivals are concerned. Yes, it did, and I enjoyed that much. And as I can remember, you made your own distribution. Yeah. And I've learned much from that experience. It was worth years of school learning. How to apply, the know-how, which festivals to take part in. I was scheduled in a section in Sheffield Cine World side by side with Scorsese, with his latest film, 2014, a documentary about music. Another point, if you allow me, Olfa, in the cinema, you can watch and listen. This is at the primary degree, 0 degree reading. And there is what we call a commissioned film. Antonioni made commissioned films. The gods of the seventh art made this kind of films. Some of these are called corporate movies. The association itself is also a corporation. Those associative films which choose an issue and work on it, it is a genre of cinema, such as the ethnographic, the wildlife, etc. Therefore, this kind of films has its own pathway from the beginning to the end, and it is done differently. The New World method, another path, another progression. It is also another way of producing images. The way we call them is something different. What matters here is to watch and to listen, and above all, to tell the story of a people, tell the short story of a people. The landscape is diversified. There are different media through which you can show your audiovisual products, the conventional medium of diffusion is still there, it is undying. But there are new forms of broadcasting in the whole world. They used to work with film stock. Now, the same film is released on the same day, same hour, and there are other forms. Besides, the cinema is an art that allows such diversification. There is one kind of films whose targeted audience doesn't exceed 5 viewers. An 8.5-hour Godard, the Great, is meant to entertain people. Taking with them some sunflower seeds or a bag of popcorn, watch it at Cinema Pathé. This can't be. What I want to say here is that there are entertainment films that are requested by the great public. Besides, this art includes all the facets of man. Some reach 1 out of 48, and others play on a whole facet. That's how it goes. This is quite normal, as well as justifiable. In my viewpoint, this doesn't have any effect on the matter. Well, Hatem, earlier I wanted to talk about amateurism and professionalism and the funds that are raised by foreign associations. I would like to talk about cinema as a form of expression which is rather costly and that has a great impact on the artist's freedom of expression when he or she broadcasts any piece of work. The fact that the associations and the platform prefer certain themes and not others, as we have mentioned earlier, limits enormously the freedom of expression of the filmmaker. Thus, he finds himself either forced to indulge in something he doesn't necessarily want to talk about at that precise time and feels obliged to scriptwrite around something just to produce a film, or only the people who are interested in that topic would attend. We also talked about the question of sponsoring, which is restricted to those professionals, to those who had professional cards. Are these people the only ones who are entitled to be called professionals? And the only ones who have the right to receive funds from the state to produce a film? Not necessarily. Otherwise, they are to collect funds here and there through grants, as it is the case with our collective. So, thanks to grants, personal funds from each member of the group or the collective, so that each time one of us produces something about the topic he or she wants to talk about. And here, when we talk about the money coming from outside, we can talk about the whole history of the Tunisian cinema, where the number of films made is not that significant.
برودكسيون وكل شيء. بون جو سي با ما نعرفش علاش ما
I don't know why, but
تونس كل عمرها
Tunisia,
كدولة
as a state and as a government,
d'une manière sérieuse
has unfortunately never given serious importance to the cinema, and we are still carrying on the same path, although a new wave of young directors is emerging from universities, clubs. Many cinema lovers want to express themselves, wishing to see the infrastructure of this art, I would rather use the term industry, subsidized by the government. Imagine what those youths would have achieved had they been provided with the necessary funds. In the meantime, countries with no history in the audiovisual domain are achieving a great progress. Look at the youths who are leaving the country to Dubai, to Europe, to Canada, to many countries. It is heartbreaking. We may wonder what they could have achieved had they stayed here. I come across many youngsters on a daily basis whose eagerness to work is beyond description. Yet, once inside the system, they find out that it's very frustrating on all levels. Logistics, money, everything, despite the significant human potential. Historically speaking, we have never been far from Orientalism here in Tunisia. I am speaking cinema, of course. The Occidental money is there, and it forces the realizer to do things he doesn't necessarily feel like doing. Sometimes we even start thinking of working on a certain topic just to satisfy the wishes of the investors. When are we going to have a certain independence? I don't know. Bearing the whole situation of the country in mind, I doubt whether the cinema is going to be a priority. It's okay. The point that Hatem raised concerning the political orientation and funding of the films is super interesting. Hatem, we can't hear you. You are talking at the same time. I do apologize, Sahar, if I made a flashback in the middle of another debate, but because I was disconnected, I missed certain parts of the debate. Okay, the idea is, are digital platforms something good or bad for those young film makers concerning the distribution of their product? It is your own problem, Sahar, with your film. Is it something good or bad? Especially now, as we are facing a real problem in the matter of diffusion. That's why these young realizers consider those platforms as a good alternative in order to distribute their films. Now, you can see a film on Netflix or Artify that has already or that has hardly been projected in theaters. Okay, the issue of film distribution is a universal phenomenon. There are some great films that have been shown in renowned festivals and then projected 2 or 3 times in theaters, yet haven't been cheered by the audience. Let alone short films here in Tunisia. They can't be broadcast in movie theaters. They can only be seen in some cultural spaces or in one of the festivals, and now on one of those digital platforms which have emerged mainly in the aftermath of the pandemic. Artify is an important experience, but I doubt whether it can solve the problem of distribution.
C'est une expérience معناتها تجربه هي مهمه لكن الفيلم كيفاش باش يلقى حلو ديجا كون تونيزي on n'a pas la culture de voir des films en ligne معناتها dans le sens où tu payes تدفع باش تتفرج في فيلم معناتها on a tendance à voir des films en streaming gratuit des films piratés فهمت mais avoir une plateforme tunisienne nationale pour la promotion du film tunisien.
First of all, we Tunisians, we are still not used to pay to watch a film online. We would rather watch a film by rapid streaming of hacked stuff. Having a national Tunisian platform for the promotion of the Tunisian film, for me, is something very critical and delicate. We all know that this culture of paying and watching a film on a digital platform is still unfamiliar and hard to accept. Besides, taking into account all the effort done during the making of the film, and even after the movie was paid for and broadcast on the platform, firstly, it is not available for anyone and for everyone. Not all the people have access to that platform. Besides, those platforms don't have a well-established economic pattern. They themselves are still searching such models. Following the example of the world-famous platforms such as Netflix Movie, which is exclusive to the cinema of authors, or the French platform Time, which is concerned with documentaries, or the Cineclub. In Tunisia, platforms are still in the process of experimenting. Therefore, they still don't have a well-established economic model. If the film is not shown for free, I highly doubt that there will be a great reception of the film. And honestly, that is not the appropriate frame for the film. The normal place of the film is the movie theater. Therefore, I don't think that those platforms can be an alternative to the classical distribution of films or to the movie theater. Don't you agree with me that neither have we solved the problem of the conventional distribution of Tunisian films, whether short or long, nor have we reconciled with the new phenomenon of digital platforms? Bearing in mind that no youth can build a cinema career if he didn't start with short films. It is quite normal not to see a short film, whether in America, Germany, or France, be straight away taken by a distributor or a cinema. No. First, it has to start with a festival, and quite often it is not broadcast during the festival, depending on film selection that is quite normal. Then, talking about solutions, I don't think that is the most appropriate term to be used here. I would rather use the word alternative. Besides, we are not the Ministry of Culture. It's not our job to find solutions. You see, I remember in 2009, I don't know if Ahmed shares my opinion, If you remember the independent collective of the Action for the Climate, which was founded in 2009 as a reaction to the dysfunctioning and exclusions that occurred in the Ministry of Culture, with a committee for the reform of the cinematographic sector, or something like that.
Les collectifs هما موجودين لنا باش يعملوا افلام وحتى لي كوليكتيف ماهمش يبقاو ما يدوموش في الزمن معنا ان كوليكتيف سي اون اكسبيريونس كي est bien établie dans le temps et dans l'espace تقوم بالعمل نتاعها باش هي بيدها تنجم من بعد تقوم معناتها تخلق معناتها تخلق créer معناتها de nouveaux modes de fonctionnement ولا de fabrication de films معناتها et c'est partout c'est un peu partout dans le monde après في تونس بقى باش نحكيو على الدعم عندنا برشا مشاكل une seule commission de subvention de films par année déjà qu'on a des problèmes liés à la question du statut de l'artiste des problèmes liés à la question de la carte professionnelle donc c'est très délicat maintenant je pense.
Therefore, an independent collective was created as a reaction to that so-called reform committee for the cinematographic sector. That is to say, in Tunisia, many attempts have been made on the level of reforms or political initiatives vis-à-vis what was going on, yet there are issues that are beyond our capacity. The collectives are there to make films. However, they cannot be there forever. A collective is an experience that is well defined in time and space. It accomplishes its mission so that later on it plays its role in creating a functional model for filmmaking. And this is the case throughout the world. Besides, if we want to talk about funds, we have plenty of problems. There is only one committee for grants a year, added to the problem of defining the status of the artist. Also problems related to the professional card. Thereby, talking about a solution to the cinema sector in Tunisia seems to be rather utopic. We can suggest things, find alternatives, also look through the experience of one another. How Ahmed tries to make his own films, the collectives established after 2010, how they gathered, then each found his own way to produce his own shots. Therefore, we can't talk about solutions, we may give suggestions, that's all. One has to sculpt his own pathway to make his own film. Then as for the financing, well, money is not there, but at the level of SINAC, we know very well how hard it is to provide funds. We are waiting for the only committee to deliver its verdict. Who's gonna have what? On the other hand, Hatem has mentioned the issue of independent or not independent. The question here is independent. Of what? Independent of whom? As a filmmaker, are you independent of the Ministry of Culture but you manage to collect some foreign funds and make an excellent film? Or independent concerning your own topic and get the support from the ministry as you can have an independent project and get the grant and vice versa? Independent of what? These are important fields to be analyzed. You can be an independent artist, but you are still getting the money from the Ministry of Culture. Independent in what way exactly? Being an independent artist doesn't mean you don't get money from the ministry. When I raised the question, I spoke about the foreign funding, because if you get the money from Tunisia, you know very well the pathway. The money will go to the company and then you will manage to make the film. And as a realizer who is on good terms with the company in question, you can deal with the theme you like. However, when you are dependent on the funds coming from abroad, the problem is that the fundraiser is going to decide about the theme. I mean the content of the film. Even if you have a certain margin of freedom, you won't be 100% independent in the course of the production. If we had the necessary funding at home, we could be independent as far as the topic dealt with.
تنجم تكون معناها indépendant en tout cas في le contenu في السوجي que tu veux traiter. Indépendant, je parle de 100% bien sûr.
أنا ces 10 dernières années, il y a des productions tunisiennes, des films tunisiens qui ont été financés par des fonds internationaux et ce sont des films indépendants à mon sens.
As I see it, the Tunisian films which were financed from abroad in the last decade were independent.
qu'il y a des projets dans ce sens-là, mais كيما قلت لك زاد فما بعض ساعات
I know. I'm not generalizing Sahar here. I know very well that there were projects going in this way. But I think that sometimes you make your own self-censorship. I am talking here about my experience and that of my friends, you see. But I know that there are some people who got granted from abroad, yet they could treat the topics they had chosen. I think it is advisable we try to contextualize in order not to generalize, because the idea that the foreign funds automatically oblige the directors to make the film according to limited criteria has become stereotyped, in my opinion, because by 2011, there was a great cinematographic movement towards treating current events that we are living. At first, we started dealing with the revolution, our environment, then we started tackling social and sexual genre. It depends on what the filmmaker wishes to convey. In other words, when applying for grants, you are not told that the film has to tackle this or that topic. It's you who decides which cinema, which image you would like for your film. Then it became a common opinion that there is a North cinema and a South cinema. I believe that 10 years later, now, at least in Tunisia, filmmakers have acquired a certain maturity that allows the director to recognize, identify his or her own cinema. It's true that he strives for the thematics required by certain festivals. But, well, Sahar, the stereotyped idea couldn't have come from nowhere. It exists. It's true that the filmmakers are now more mature and can impose their idea. We don't disagree upon this. The question was raised because it really exists. It is not a lie. 10 years is not that long. When we talk about 2013, it means 7 years now. It is not long ago.
تطرح الموضوع على خاطر موجود الموضوع. سي با ماهوش غبار على عينيك، فهمت شنو نقصد؟ موجود.
Okay. Now we've got 10 minutes left. So would you give a word to close up? Each one of you. The floor is to Durra and Ahmed, as the last duel was between Sahar and Hatem. Okay, Ulfa? I think the debate was very interesting. Yeah, it was very interesting in the way that it branched out on very important subjects. It shows the complexity of the cinema industry in Tunisia, from the production to the diffusion and even to the documentation. When we mention the diffusion, I wish we could develop more on the question of the value chain of the production process. From the very beginning, from the very emergence of the idea of the film, to the making than the diffusion and distribution of the film. I would also comment on what the dual Hatem Sahar have mentioned earlier. Hatem has brought about the problem of dependence in relation with commissioned films, which hinder the realizer of the film from having a margin of independence to produce.
de commande اللي ما يخليوش justement le réalisateur et le producteur عندهم une marge معناها d'indépendance qui نجموا يproduisent.
The margin I was talking about, Ulfa, has always been there. What I really focused on in my intervention was mainly the funds. Sorry, but they are not commissioned films. They are films that are broadcast in festivals and in movie theaters. Sahar, I'm talking about funds more than anything else. Even the festivals may prefer a certain topic to another topic. We already know. This is it. It's not something new. And also the commissioned films have always existed. Maybe the idea was not clear to me, but to summarize the topic should be treated in depth and talk about the role of the cultural collectives, the role of the state, which is not enough, and other independent structures which can sponsor the cinema, which is the case of some foreign countries. Without giving names here, there is a concrete example very near Tunisia, where there are some private enterprises that have the possibility to subsidize and to back the film industry. Another point that we could develop further some other time maybe, which is the intergenerational debate in relation with the actual diagram or the constitution of the industry, of the film industry in Tunisia, remained in the hands of a certain number of people who unfortunately refuse to transmit the know-how to the young. Sadly, some people are unwilling to share their knowledge with others. This is it. Ahmed? This debate reminds me of the story of the countryman, the small farmers who possess the old traditional seeds that have their own flavor, own color, and own roots in this land, and their problems were how to bring those seeds back to this land before the coming of the GMO, the generally modified organisms. In the state of play, we have the movie theaters, the TV, which are two classical media. And then came these new media, the platforms, the famous platforms, which came into existence in parallel with the emergence of a new school, churning with young talents who expressed their desire to move within a new form of expression that they like, that they can work in. According to what I can see, there are these digital platforms, plus, just for the sake of diffusing a film, a producer can turn to Facebook or YouTube, which alone can make many views. Yeah. And if the producer, as an independent filmmaker, who is not a puppet, who doesn't belong to this nursery or stable, because actually film production is becoming like any manufacture. Each producer has his own faults. Each time he participates with one of those horses, this one is fit for Venice, and that one is for Cannes. And if you pardon me, you already know the racing horse which doesn't win is doomed to the slaughterhouse. For God's sake, there are people who have no relation with the slaughterhouse, nor with all these stories. They use this form of expression as the only alternative they have simply because they want to breathe, as long as we are not in an industry. If your audience is 5 viewers, that's great for a film. Okay, we wish it could be watched by 5 billions. Yet, any cinema should have an objective. Each film has a targeted audience. There are people who have 100,000 cameras shooting them. And at the same time, there are 10 people, I alone, am going to shoot. Those 10 have also the right to be filmed. Each film, whatever he or she likes, and such diversification is beneficent. I am going to reveal something I feel. The world is fed up with repeating the same allegories. There are new stories that are sculpted. And they are sculpting their paths. Our landscape is full of hardships and weeds. Nothing is done in sunlight. Everything is done in corners and under the table. Therefore, you can't cope with such attitudes. And there are the others. The world is so large. In a nutshell, to my mind, those who choose to work this way should assume full responsibility, and he or she has all the assets to send the message he or she likes. One of the suggestions, I'm not going to say solutions, as this government has no cultural projects, no cultural policies, no clear vision, nor roadmap, they don't even know what is the plan for tomorrow. Therefore, leave your people alone. Let them breathe. Let them breathe. Each on his way. I want to film something. Why tying me with regulations? Why asking me for a shooting license? Once the license is there, you require a professional card. Oh my God! What does this have to do with that? Do I need a card to dream? You see what I want to say? It means the state is confiscating even your dream, ready with its scissors to cut. You want to draw a butterfly, and they tell you, wouldn't it be a better idea if you drew a boat? Why not a flower? Till you say, I don't need it anymore, leave me in peace. Okay, I like what you have just said, Ahmed. The two last words cap it all. Hatem, Ulfa and Sahar have stated in a popular way that Tunisians must understand very well. Now, 2 minutes for Hatem and 2 minutes for Sahar. I'm not going to be long. I had the impression that I was naggingly persistent earlier concerning the question of production, but I still believe that there must be other forms, solutions and tips to produce as many people are doing now. It must also have a certain charm to be still doing acrobatics, as what happened on the days when we were still small kids. We were ready to do anything in order to get some pocket money to go out for an evening and everything. We have spent all our lives jostling, and now, at this age, we are still doing the same thing, and believe me, it has got its own charm. I don't like to say I'd prefer this to that, but when the product is released, after a long and tedious work, whatever the product is, it must be a source of pride for the realizer, the producer, and all the team. And as you said, Ahmed, whether the film is watched by 5 or 5 million, the problem is not there. It will always remain a form of expression again. I refer to your words. There are people who are right. Hatem, I've said it as long as we are not an industry. We don't have an industry. Of course, certainly we don't have an industry. We don't have an industry. No, we don't. We are here to preserve memory. And there are memories. Of course. Each has the right to center whatever he likes in the picture he likes. So this is it. A breath, as you said earlier, a breath in this country. The atmosphere that you will find in the writing, in the shooting, all that fun. Then, at the time of the results, we aren't Americans to strive to come number one. It's not our objective, and we were not brought up to believe in it. The fact that you have an idea which you want to convey is already an objective among other objectives. Thank you, Hatem. Sahar? I'm not going to run through the point that we have been discussing earlier because it is really beyond me. To talk about the industry of the cinema or the Tunisian cinema, it's a fact today that what has happened these last years, many cultural associations which are also in the film production, like what Olfa is doing now, or the project in which I participated as a first step. Therefore, there are really associations which are there and which are taking part in the discovery of young Tunisian talents who are passionate of the cinema. Then, whether these films are going to participate in festivals or projected in cinemas, we don't really know. However, the cinematographic culture and the access to image and to the cinematographic culture is very interesting and very important. That's why it's very important to have such projects and such facilities in order to express oneself, of course, by means of pictures. And these letters are important both for the parents and the youths. What is going on today is very important. And if we want to talk about the Tunisian cinema and the production tools, then this is another level. The cinema is there, and as Tunisians, we are not going to pretend aspiring or longing for touring the world. Filmmakers are there. Experiences in the history of the Tunisian cinema have always existed. They are experiences of commitment, experiences of resistance to a certain form of hegemony. in the plural which has existed in the country. So what is going on today on the level of cinematographic associations is very important. Then each filmmaker traces his own path, whether in the production, distribution, or diffusion of a film during festivals. Well, this is it. Thank you, Sahar, Hatem, Ulfa, and Ahmed, who has been disconnected at the end. Yes, we've lost him. Thank you all for participating today. This was Russia 6, Tunisia from the United Screens. Even the people who are going to watch can move inside this virtual space and watch the works and participations of every speaker, Ahmed, Ulfa, Hatem, their works, and get the information they like. And they can take the information they like. I have also inserted some resources, research articles. Yes, while Sahar was talking, I scrolled some articles about the film, also the works of Ulfa, Ahmed. They will be always on this platform. So for those who want to have an idea, they can find things written on the left. They have just to click on a button on the left, for example, in relation with Ahmed, the art studio fabric, or about in between, you can find Sahar's articles or also Ulfa's, Hatem's. This is the idea of the platform of Rashes. So again, thank you everybody. I also thank Afaq for its support to this project, and Savi, which together with the Bedna agency from Egypt and Avec from Tunisia, thank you all. Goodbye.